Good morning, students. How are you doing? I hope you're all doing good and staying safe at home. So, this is your history teacher, Manjula Raghunath, walking you through the first recorded session of a very interesting chapter. So, the topic name will be revealed to you in a minute or so. But, students, I want you to think like how many centuries back, how was India ruled, or how was India? So we know that India was a land of kings, and we had great kings like Ashoka, then Chandragupta Maurya, Samudragupta, then we had the Mughal rulers like Shah Jahan, Akbar the Great, then Jahangir. So why am I talking about all these rulers? Because they all captured many territories and expanded their kingdoms. They brought so many kingdoms, the small kingdoms, so many territories under their control. But yet, they were tolerant towards the other religions, except for a few examples like Aurangzeb, who was quite a tyrant, who was intolerant towards the Hindus. But even he tried to bring in a lot of reforms and changes and developments for the territories which was under his control. So why is this very important? This is important, students, because we are walking through a very important session or a chapter in history, unit 2, called Nationalism in India. So students, this lesson, Nationalism in India, is very important because it carries total 6 marks. So questions anywhere from 1 mark, 2 mark or 3 marks may appear. Okay, so please pay very good attention towards the chapter that we are walking through. The same will be also discussed while the school reopens. Okay, so students, in the previous chapter you learned about what were the changes that were happening in Europe, what was the revolution that occurred in Europe. You learned about Lenin, you learned about Hitler as well, right? So slowly you saw that how European continent transformed from being an agrarian or an agricultural country to that of an industrialized nation. Even today, Europe is shining as an industrialized nation. But why should we deal about Europe? Now the same events, certain reasons or factors helped favor India to grow the spirit of nationalism. Nationalism, and what does this mean? So let's see through this chapter, like what are some of the learning objectives that you're going to gain. The first thing is you will be able to understand the factors that were responsible for strengthening the spirit of nationalism in India. Then this chapter will help you analyze the impact of the moments in the independence struggle of India, and you will be able to evaluate and understand the influence of Mahatma Gandhi and his ways of fighting against the Britishers in order to get us this freedom. So children, we know that India was under the British rule for more than 2 centuries, out of which the 90-year phase, that is from 1857 to 1947, was very crucial. So this was the phase when the spirit of nationalism was high. People started thinking like, why Britishers are ruling over us? What made them come to India? So why should we agree or stay under the subjugation of the Britishers? So they started questioning, they started criticizing the Britishers, and that is how we coined that the spirit of nationalism grew. So we will be studying this spirit in 3 different phases. The main contents of this lesson will be what is the meaning of nationalism, what are the phases in the struggle of nationalism, and then what factors were responsible for the rise of nationalism in India. So first of all, let's deal with the meaning. So it's in simple words, it means that a sense of oneness among the people who are living in a territory, state, or a nation. Say, for example, you live in the state of Manipur, so you are identified as a Manipuri. Suppose a person who is from Assam, he will be identified as a Assamese. The person from Bengal will be identified as a Bengali, right? And you guys know that I am from the south, Bangalore, but the state I belong to is Karnataka, so I will be referred to as a Kannadiga. So any state or any territory which we belong to, or we feel that this is my land, I belong to this particular land, is nothing but nationalism. In other words, it means a consciousness of the people about their identity and a sense of belonging to a particular territory. So, we know that India is a land of various ethnic groups, so many religions, so many cultures, and it's completely diverse. Diverse means multiple languages are spoken, multiple eating habits are there, multiple living habits, living styles are there, their traditions are different. So, India is a land of diversity, but yet we all are united by the name India, which shows unity in us. So, this unity is nothing but nationalism. So, in other words, children, it also means a sense of pride, a sense of respect, a sense of devotion, and a sense of sacrificing your lives for the nation's sake is nothing but nationalism. Okay. So this nationalism can be studied in three different phases. So the first phase is 1857, which is also called as a Sepoy Mutiny, or the first war of Indian independence. And then comes the second phase, which is between 1885 to 1918. So during this phase, certain organizations, very important organization like Indian National Congress was founded, and then you will be studying about what were the different phases within this Indian National Congress duration. Like moderates were there for some time, and then came the extremists, and then came certain revolutionary groups who wanted to fight for the sake of the nation. And last phase, very important phase, is between 1919 to 1947. So we all know that Mahatma Gandhi was the leader behind the freedom struggle. So this phase is called as a Gandhian era, because under the leadership of the Mahatma, certain events, certain phases, certain propagandas, certain protests and organizations worked together in order to achieve this freedom for the nation. Okay. So let's see what were certain factors that were responsible for the rise of this nationalistic spirit. First is economic, then political, socio-religious, cultural and intellectual, and Western education. So children, please remember that the Britishers came to India for trading purposes. You know that how Vasco da Gama came to India, he found out the sea route to India, and then slowly they started to, towards the end of the 16th century, around 1600s, the Britishers came, and how they started to colonize India, right? So it was basically the profit or the trading activities that made them attracted to stick to India. They used to take all the raw materials from India back to England, and then they used to get the finished products from there and sell it back to India at a very higher rate. This in turn killed most of the Indian handloom industries, the craftsmanships, the cottage industries, and the handicraft industries. People suffered a lot because the machine made cloths, for example, was very attractive, and people were influenced by the Western wear or the Western culture. All this happened towards the end of the 19th century. So people were very much influenced or loved the Western education. And as early as 1835 children, Macaulay, the viceroy, who was the viceroy of India, he had made English as the medium of education, which means English medium started as early as 1835. So from then onwards, people started to, attend English medium schools. They used to take knowledge, they used to attend, they used to get more and more knowledge about the Western culture, the Western education, which kind of influenced them also think like what made Britishers come to India and why are they ruling over us. They started to questionize, they started to criticize certain reforms, they started to analyze what was good for them and what the Britishers were doing, whether it's right or wrong for the welfare of our own statesmen. So we should also see that there were some political factors. We can't say that Britishers were completely bad. They did not do any good for India, but they brought in political unification. Like many kingdoms, the small principalities, the territories, all were united under one common law. So, for example, we can talk about the doctrine of lapse, which was introduced by Lord Dalhousie, and subsidiary alliances. So, what does these two alliances talk about? They are, say for example, doctrine of lapse. It said any kingdom that did not have a natural successor to the throne, that kingdom would come under the Britishers' control, which means they brought this kingdom under their control, they modified the laws, they implemented the laws that could be easily applied by them so that they can have greater control over this kingdom. So is a subsidiary alliance. Like any king who could not face the attacks of the other rulers, they had to station a British army in their kingdom and take care of the British army completely. They had to pay a tax for stationing the British army in their kingdom. Through this, they used to bring in a lot of economic development for the country, for their own country, in the means for Britain, not for India. So likewise, there were also certain socio-religious activities going on. Like we know that Raja Ram Mohan Roy was there, who fought for the freedom of women. Like he revolted against sati system. He also spoke about widow remarriages. He revolted against the child marriages. So all such activities were going on, which means people had started to question like why sati should be followed. Sati means when a husband is dead, the wife would be burnt alive along with the husband. Like widows, say people used to get married very early at the age of 8 or 9, and suppose the child becomes a widow, she was not given the permission or an opportunity to get married again. So Raja Ram Mohan Roy was one such personality who questioned that why should widows not be remarried. So such developments were happening. Like in the field of literatures also, many Indian newspapers were introduced. For example, you had the Hindu, the Kesari, then Anand Bazar Patrika, the Bombay Samachar. So these were some of the important newspapers through which people were had that freedom to express what they feel about, talk about, whether it is a development, whether it is a criticism. They had that freedom to write or express their thoughts. So all these things, while all these things were happening, certain real factors gave rise to the spirit of nationalism or the phases of nationalism.